Welcome to What is Truth, brought to you by the Southern New Mexico Church of God in Las Cruces, New Mexico. What is Truth is a weekly program which seeks to focus our attention on the truth of God's Word. Now, with this week's lesson, here's Pastor Meyer Stahl.
Welcome to the program. I'm Meyer Stahl, the pastor of the Southern New Mexico Church of God, bringing you the program, What is Truth? Today's topic is, can fearful people lose their salvation? Is that possible? Is that possible that a fearful person that has fear is an emotion, is it not? Well, is it possible if you have the wrong kind of fear that you could lose your salvation? Is that at all possible? Well, it's my purpose today to explain that, to show you scripturally that fearful people can lose their salvation. Now, before we get started, I want to offer you two very important booklets. The first is, why do you observe Sunday? The Bible teaches the observance of the Sabbath day. Well, let's hold it right there a moment and let me explain. Some people think that Sunday is the Sabbath day. Well, it's not. The Sabbath day starts Friday at sunset and ends Saturday at sunset. Sunday is the first day of the week. Just look at your calendar. So why are you observing the first day of the week? Did you know that the word Sunday doesn't even show up in the Bible? Not one time. Not once. Can you find the word Sunday in your Bible? Incredible, isn't it? Well, you need to read this booklet. Take you 10 to 15 minutes to read it, that you could understand it. Now, the second booklet is Predestination. Here it is right here. Predestination, does the Bible teach it? Is your ultimate fate decided for you in advance? No subject has baffled, perplexed, and worried people more. Here, for the first time, many will read the astonishing truth, so plain all can understand. Are you predestined to be saved? Are you predestined to be lost? Read the booklet. And all you need to do to get these booklets is just call us at area code 575-650-7359. We'll be happy to send them out to you free of charge. We will pay the postage. We never ask the public for money, so you won't be asked for money, and we'll be happy to send them out to you. Just call us. So write this phone number down. We'll put it on one more time, and get a pen and a piece of paper. Get prepared to write the number down and call us as soon as the program is over. We'll have somebody at the phone waiting for your call. And now let's get back to the subject. The subject is, can fearful people lose their salvation? We're going to Revelation chapter 21, and we're looking in verse 8. And here it says, but the fearful, notice that, the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So, here it is, the second death. They will have the second death because the fearful people are also listed here with the unbelieving and the abominables and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and liars. You're telling me that fearful people should be listed among them? All right, we'll stop there. If I came into your house or saw you and pointed a gun right at your head and clicked back the hammer on that gun and said, I'm going to kill you, would you be fearful? Well, you bet. You bet you would be fearful. Does that mean that you would lose your salvation? Well, there's a certain kind of fear that you would lose your salvation. Now, what is that fear all about? All right, let's look a little further in the Bible, and let's try to determine that. We're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 14, and we're going to look at a story here of Jonathan, the son of Saul, the son of King Saul. And he says to his armor bearer, he said, but if they say, come up unto us, these are the Philistines, then we will go up, for the Lord has delivered them into our hand, and this shall be the sign unto us. So Jonathan's talking with his armor bearer, and they're trying to come to a decision. And we'll keep reading. And both of them discovered themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines. So they showed themselves. And the Philistines says, behold, the Hebrews have come forth out of the holes where they have hid themselves. So they made fun of them. They mocked them. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come up to us, and we will show you a thing. We're going to show you how to die. And Jonathan said unto his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has delivered them into the hand of Israel. And Jonathan climbed up on his hands and upon his feet, and his armor bearer after him. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer slew after him. And that first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer made was about 20 men within, as it were, a half acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow. So in a short distance, he killed 20 of the Philistines. And there was trembling in the host in the field, and among all the people, the garrison and the spoilers. They also trembled, and the earth quaked. So it was a very great trembling. We're going to stop there. So here are two men who take courage. They take courage. And they're starting out against 20 men, 20 seasoned soldiers, trained to kill. And they wipe them out. Now that's courage. Okay? Now, they could have been afraid. They could have been trembling. They could have ran away. They didn't run away. They stood their ground. And they demonstrated courage. And there are times that we need to demonstrate courage, even when we are fearful. So there is two opposites here, fear and courage. and you take courage. That's how you get courage. Let's go to the next scripture. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 17, and we'll look here at David. David went up against this Philistine, and there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Now, a cubit is about 18 inches. So he was over 9 feet tall, over 9 feet. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was about 5,000 shekels of brass. It was pretty heavy. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam. And the spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And one bearing a shield went before him. We'll stop here for a minute. This is a tank. This is an armored tank. And he's all covered with armor, and he has someone with a shield, a big shield in front of him to guard him against a spear or an arrow. So this tank is out there, and he's making fun of the Israelites and making fun of God. Okay, at verse 8. We'll come back to verse 8. And he stood and cried to the armies of Israel and said unto them, Why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and you servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down unto me. And if he be able to fight with me, to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. Wow. So it looked pretty bad there for a time. Now we're going to go down to verse 26. David comes on the scene here, and it says here in verse 26, And David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Wow, this is incredible. What David, this young teenager, this boy of about 15 or 16 maybe, said this to him. Now let's go down to verse 40. And he, David, took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David. So they're walking toward each other. And the man that bare the shield went before him. So this tank is coming down the line. It's coming toward David. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy. He probably had red hair and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog? Did you come to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give your flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. Now, he tried to intimidate David. Then said David to the Philistine, You come to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day will the Lord deliver you into my hand, and I will smite you and take your head from you, and I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Wow. David was not going to be intimidated. Well, we're going to take a short break. Please don't go away. We will be right back with the conclusion of this story. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Ray Bamberg with Here on Earth. I would like to invite you for a free hearing evaluation to our office. We've been here in southern New Mexico for 34 years helping people hear better.
Hey, don't touch that dial, because you're watching the only independent TV station here in Las Cruces, the Las Cruces Channel. Keep watching.
Call Mark Goldstein, the Safe Money Guy, at 575-556-2472 to learn about innovative strategies now available to help you grow, protect, and preserve your money and financial future, regardless of market conditions.
There you go.
So great. You can do all these different ears to the clan.
Okay.
Nice.
Guys, not all.
Just in case you tuned in late, our subject today is can fearful people lose their salvation? Now, we ended the first part of the show with David and Goliath. Now, we're going to see what happens to Goliath. And we're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 17, and we'll look here at verse 48. And it says here in verse 48, "And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took from there a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistine, and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines until you come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Sha'arim, even to Gath and unto Ekron. So we'll stop there. The important thing is David had faith. This 16-year-older had courage, and it was much more than anyone in the army of Israel had, including King Saul. King Saul was leading the men in his army. They were all shaking and shivering when they saw this 9-foot giant covered with armor, having an armor bearer with a shield in front. And David got angry. David got angry because the Philistine put down Israel and the God of Israel. And David could see past all that armor, past that battle tank, could see past that, and knew that God could cause that Philistine to die. And that's exactly what happened. So that's an amazing story, just an amazing story. Let's go on now to Revelation chapter 13. Now, this is talking about the Antichrist coming on the scene. And verse 13, and it says, and he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. So this is a miracle man, and deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had powers to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So God's people are going to be killed here. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he who had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let he who has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 666. And we see here people are going to have courage to refuse that mark of the beast. So you might be scared, you might be afraid, but you don't want to ever receive the mark of the beast, because here's the punishment of those people who receive that mark. Revelation chapter 14, we're looking at verse 9. And it says here, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever. That's the smoke. They're going to be burned up, and they shall have no rest, day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receives the mark of his name. So you don't want to ever do that. You don't want to ever receive the mark of his on your right hand or your forehead. Let's go now to Revelation chapter 21. Revelation chapter 21, and we're looking at verse 7. He who overcomes shall inherit all things. So what do we have to do? We have to overcome, don't we? We have to overcome. But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So we're stopping there. Folks, we're going to do a program next week. This is part 1, and I'm going to show you part 2, which is going to explain how God is going to preserve you and me who refuse to take the mark, because no man might buy or sell. So you can't buy food, you can't pay for anything, you can't have a job. Most likely you might lose your home, you might be homeless, you might not have a home. But how are you going to survive? Well, some people are going to say, well, I'm going to have to receive the mark. I got to feed my family. Now, just imagine, here comes the white throne judgment, and you're being tried. And God says to you, I don't find your name in the book of life. Well, I had to feed my family. Throw them in the fire. Next one. I had to feed my family. Throw them in the fire. I had to feed my family. Throw them in the fire. God fed 2 or 3 million Israelites out there in the desert for 40 years. Do you think he could feed you? Why don't you send away for these 2 booklets? Why do you observe Sunday? And the second booklet is Predestination. Does the Bible teach it? These free booklets you could have. All you need to do is call us at area code 575-650-7359. Until next time, this is Meyer Stahl, the pastor of the Southern New Mexico Church of God, saying goodbye, my friends.
You have been listening to What is Truth? With Pastor Meyer Stahl of the Southern New Mexico Church of God, located in Las Cruces, New Mexico. For copies of today's lesson or for more information, call area code 575-650-7359. That's 575-650-7359. Join us next week at this same time for another edition of What is Truth? Until next week, we wish you God's richest blessings.